Hi, everyone, and welcome back to yet another cracking installment of the Matt Brown Show. This is the Secrets of Scale series, where I'm connecting you to incredible talent, founders, visionaries, and just people who really shape the world of investors and the world of business, I should say. That is a very fitting introduction for our guest today. His name is David Wield. He's the former chairman, or vice chairman rather, of the NASDAQ, and he's currently the founder and CEO of Weild Co, which we're going to get into all today. David, it's a real privilege having you on the Matt Brown Show. Thank you for being here.
Terrific. It's nice to be here, Matt.
Yeah, lots to cover today. So I had the chance to get to know you and the incredible impact that you've had on the US business environment from my perspective. But for our viewers around the world who haven't had that privilege and maybe have been living in a tree and don't know who you are and what you're about, I'd love for you just to kick us off and fill our viewers in from around the world. Give us a little bit about your background and tell us what you're up to at Weild Co.
Well, look, I've had a great career, and I'm having another great career. But I started out, I ran a top 10 investment bank, and I ran equity capital markets at that bank at one point. Priced 1,000 public equity offerings, including 500 IPOs. Raised the first money for Larry Fink at BlackRock. Now the largest asset manager in the world. Helped save Celgene, that ultimately was sold to Bristol Myers Squibb for $70+ billion. Took NVIDIA public, worked on that IPO for Jensen Huang, which is now doing AI chips, but was doing all the 3D visualization for all your gaming and everything. So, it's been, I'm a big believer in the growth economy and access to capital. So after I was vice chairman of NASDAQ, I went and started writing papers about what was wrong with our stock markets. And that led to the Jobs Act, which was the most important pro-capital formation legislation in a generation, actually going back to the Investment Company Act of 1940. So you could say probably two generations. And it actually caused the life sciences IPO market to almost instantaneously triple. It funded the messenger RNA technology of Moderna, according to Lawrence Kim, who was the CFO. It created the whole crowdfunding securities industry. So it's been a ride, and now we're looking to create. We're walking into that big lower middle market, private markets, and trying to bring order and efficiency to it on the investment banking front. We think it's one of the most important markets to get right in the United States because it has great economic growth upside. So we're at 126 bankers in 26 states, and we aim to be at 1,000 in the next 5 years.
Cool, David. Thank you for the introduction and the context for everyone. I would like to double click on Weild Co. What's the issue from your perspective? What is the problem that you guys are looking to solve for the world?
Well, I think investment banking is a team sport, right? When guys get deals done, if you go into a big firm, and remember, I ran strategic planning and banking research, sales, and trading, and what you end up with is that every deal is a project, and every project requires an optimized project team. And particularly in this, you need an industry expert, you need a product expert. So a product would be, are you taking the company public? Is the different set of skills than are you doing a high yield transaction and a bond indenture? Are you doing a public tender offer? And you need that skill on the team. You need a different kind of sales force. Many times, people that are going to private debt are different than people that are going to high yield, or different than people selling treasuries. And so all that kind of stuff goes on. And so what happens in these little investment banks in the middle market is that you don't have access to the requisite experts. And so we look at that as sort of just-in-time human capital. And we want to, make sure that with scale, we can efficiently scale or properly staff any kind of a transaction. And that's what we think is really missing from private markets, that there's just not that you get a suboptimal deal team. Somebody tries to be the chef, the cook, and the bottle washer, do it all. It doesn't work very well. The client gets a bad result. A lot of companies spend too much time looking for the right place to raise capital, and they hit an iceberg. They run out of money. I'm sorry about that.
Is that your dog again?
Yeah, and run out of money, and and this is we want to bring greater effectiveness. I hesitate to say efficiency because our model is about making investment bankers more money and helping everybody be more proficient and effective and get better outcomes for our clients and our investors. So it just requires being able to organize to be able to deliver better results to everyone.
And we're going to circle back there in a moment, everyone. So, David, I'd love to go back to your background, like the origin story. I'm curious to unpack and connect the dots around, what inspired you to become involved in the stock market and investment banking, and how did you get your start in the industry?
So I was doing graduate work in molecular genetics, and then I got sort of really demoralized with the pace of lab research, and it wasn't my thing. I was a better theoretical geneticist than I was a cook in the kitchen, and at the same time, I saw Genentech go public in 1980, and the stock gap from 30 to 80, and I had been having these debates with people about the promise of genetic engineering, and all of a sudden it was sort of crystallized by just seeing that stock do so well on its IPO. And so the magic of being able to put capital into the hands of scientists and engineers and to solve great challenges for humanity was sort of just like a siren song, brought me straight to Wall Street.
Amazing. And you obviously had a huge impact there. And I think you touched on it up front, but it was, you're basically known as the father of the Jobs Act. And I'd love for you to discuss some of the key provisions of the legislation and how it has actually impacted the financial industry, rather, since its passage.
Well, it's an omnibus bill. There were actually 6 different bills that got wrapped into one, and there was a 7th title tacked on to support it with education of women and minorities and poor people. But it gave you crowdfunding, Reg CF, which is now up to $5 million. It gave you the general solicitation of private placements under Reg D, which is now Rule 506C. That came directly from me. But we were just basically saying, come on, it's like crazy that you are prohibiting people from soliciting folks. What's important is, you can tell a story to anybody, shout it from the mountaintops, but at the end of the day, what you care about if you're doing a private placement is that the person that purchases it is adequately sophisticated. Or in the case of Reg CF, that they don't risk so much money that it puts them into deep financial problems. And so, we just essentially said that there was a better way to do these things. And testing the waters also kind of trickled all the way through pre-IPO, which allows you to then talk to investors before you go public, institutional investors. And I sometimes felt like I was playing like I was the little boy in the emperor's new clothes that just was saying things that I thought other people sort of understood. But people believed me because I was former vice chairman of NASDAQ, and I ran a top 10 investment bank. So I'm part of the establishment. And so I was just questioning why we were doing things. But that testing the waters was revolutionary because it created that whole class of pre-IPO crossover buyers that became technical leads on the cap table of companies before they went public that had an opportunity now in private markets to do deep due diligence and to put their imprimatur, whether it's Fidelity or T. Rowe Price, or in the life sciences area, OrbiMed, Deerfield, Perceptives, that have deep life sciences expertise. And so other investors would say, okay, clearly people that know what they're doing have put money into this company. So it de-risked it for the broader institutional equity market. And as a consequence, brought a lot of funds onto the cap tables when they went public, made the IPO market much more successful. And according to the Biotechnology Innovation Organization, the trade group, almost instantaneously tripled the number of life sciences IPOs, led to 18 new drug approvals in the first 5 years. And if you listen to Moderna and Lawrence Kim, who was the CFO there at the time, he said it funded their messenger RNA technology. Well, according to The Economist, that saved 1.5 to 2 million lives just from Moderna's technology alone. And that's why we did this stuff. I mean, we believe that if you're going to solve big problems, it's going to be done by engineers and scientists, and they have to get capitalized. And so for me, as a patriot, what I want to do is I want to liberate part of that $30 trillion of public equity money that's up there, bring it down into the small cap markets where the innovators live and where you can lose money, because a large company is worried about quarterly earnings and they can't lose money, so they can't do this kind of innovation. And then we want to lower the ceiling at which you can take a company public, so you can get a liquidity event earlier on and get more money to essentially circle through at higher velocity through the entrepreneurial growth part of the market. And we think that will sustain U.S. competitive advantage and pay for taxes, help fund the deficit, do a lot of things that are incredibly helpful to the United States. And plus, because we're a market that everybody looks to in the Western world. Excuse me. It'll allow us to maybe also get Europeans and allies, NATO allies, to be more productive with their economies.
Mm-hmm. So speaking of the SMB, small and mid-sized company segments of the USA, what challenges do you see in terms of them facing, or what challenges you see them facing in terms of accessing capital markets, and how do you feel like some of those challenges could be addressed today?
Well, I think we need a new form of stock exchange that is optimized for the needs of smaller companies. The current one doesn't work, and it's a one-size-fits-all market that's optimized for innately liquid stocks, and it doesn't support. It's not optimized for the needs of innately illiquid stocks, and so we've gotten close on that. I mean, we almost got something done through Congressman Emmer's office that was wrapped into the Jobs and Investor Confidence Act of 2018, I believe it was. And then when President Trump shut down the wall, it pushed the appropriations bill that it was supposed to have been tacked onto into the next Congress. And as a consequence, the legislation failed, but it had gone through the House 406-4. So there was an appetite, and it was overwhelmingly bipartisan.
That's amazing.
And so I think that for us with our business, we're in the process of doing a round of financing. As soon as we do that, we're going to start doing some of the writing that we did that raises the visibility on these issues. It'll raise obviously the visibility on our firm, but it ultimately is the fodder that legislators use to create policy. And then it's just a question of hanging around long enough and getting lucky, because when they're not, a lot of times you have these sort of Death Stars that go through the Congress where it sucks all the marginal or incremental side legislation out of the equation, because they're focused on the tax bill that Trump got through, or Obamacare that Obama got through, or in the case of the Biden administration, the infrastructure bill, and those things tend to be all hands on deck, and you really don't get a lot of stuff done, and then they run into the campaign periods, which take people's attention away, and so you really have to kind of constantly nurture this. The quasi-economic papers that create win-win value propositions, because there's a thirst for this stuff. People that are in Congress want to do things that actually will improve the country, but a lot of what is done is not intentionally bipartisan, but rather it's lobbying for special interests. There's 12,000 lobbyists in Washington. And lobbying for special interests, there's only, call it in round numbers, 550, 560 congressmen and senators, maybe it's 600, I don't know, but something like that. You got nearly 20-to-1 ratios of self-interested lobbyists going after congressmen and senators. Mm. So we're believers that you got to you got to do things a little bit differently, and you have to be a subject matter expert. The average congressman really has no understanding of market structure and connecting these dots. And it is the people's house, particularly in the House of Representatives. And so, spending the time and putting together data and things that are simple for people to understand, to show where the challenges are, the dysfunction is absolutely essential to the better workings of capital markets, because otherwise people tend to do things that are politically motivated and can create these great unintended consequences, which is what happened with our public markets, how we got to this hyper-efficient, trading-centric, low-cost market that really only works for large cap innately liquid stocks and really undermines the growth economy.
I want to just touch on something you mentioned, David, about you see yourself as a patriot and you really want to make a difference to this financial industry, and you have had a significant impact on the financial industry through your work at the NASDAQ, which we'll come back to in a moment. But as we have touched on now, as the father of the Jobs Act, so when it comes to your influence, how do you see your own influence on the industry? And in the context now of Weild Co, what responsibility do you feel to use your platform to drive positive change?
Well, part of the reason we're in this part of the market is because this is where social impact lives. This is where the innovators are the problem solvers many times. And so alternative energy, electric vehicles, life sciences, medical devices. Obviously those things have clear positive social impact. But, part of what we are doing with this decentralized model is ultimately we want to bring investment banking support into places that don't currently have it, that actually functions. And so we're already in 26 states. That's a radically different model than a traditional investment bank that even the biggest of the big have investment bankers maybe in 5 cities, and it's typically major metropolitan areas. So, we have a vision that ultimately we get a black managing director out of Morgan Stanley that wants to go and do something for their an inner city community, but he needs an infrastructure that can support him. He's perfectly qualified to curate a deal, but stick him inside the hood in Baltimore or someplace, and he can curate transactions and he can get supported in the cloud. We think that's that's heavy social impact, and but also because a lot of the people that are on our platform are independent contractors. They can have greater work-life balance. You get a lot of people that get aged out of the business, or they just don't want to work 70 hours a week and get on a plane to China. But they have a lot to give back, and they're incredibly well qualified. And we want to keep them in the growth economy, keep them productive. And so, we've got a secular change going on with the baby boomers, higher levels of dementia. So there's going to be more people that get sucked into caregiving. You've got women that want to be able to work from home. The biggest residential real estate broker in Bronxville, where we used to live, I'm down in Nashville now, but was a woman who was a partner of my wife's, and she had gone to Harvard undergraduate, Harvard Business School, was a managing director in the investment bank at Morgan Stanley, but she wanted to be home with her kids at 3:00 in the afternoon, and she couldn't do that in a typical Wall Street bulge bracket firm. And so we think that person has essential and important skills, that all that training it's great that she can be a residential real estate broker and now one of the biggest in Westchester, but we think that that's a loss for the U.S. economy, that kind of talent. And so we'd like to be able to give women and other caregivers an option to continue to do what they were trained to do and to contribute to the growth economy, because we think that in and of itself, growing that pool of highly qualified talent is essential to the long-term success of the country.
Amazing. We need more of that. I think what you're doing is amazing. I'm going to just stay a little bit around your experience at the NASDAQ. So you were vice chairman of the NASDAQ for some time. You mentioned you valued over 1,000 different IPOs. You've had a lot of experience there on doing things at scale, passing legislation, impacting the financial industry at scale. And now you're obviously focused on Weild Co. So I'm curious to get your perspective on how your experience as vice chairman of the NASDAQ influenced your approach to leading and scaling Weild Co.
Well, I would say that first, NASDAQ was an incredible education for me. It's a very few people actually working at a big investment bank, and then you take a pay cut to do it, go to a stock exchange. And I was very successful on the investment banking side. I was president of the .com businesses of Prudential Financial at one point, which were all the different verticals, the securities, online securities business, the insurance, the real estate, bank and trust, asset management. And when I got over to NASDAQ, though, I followed my mentor. It was a gentleman named Wick Simmons, who I absolutely adore. He's ethical as the day is long, and Harvard undergraduate, Harvard Business School, and he needed somebody to run the listings businesses there globally. So that's what I did. And partly I did it because that was the home of the growth companies, the technology companies. And so I spent time with Steve Jobs, Craig Barrett, who was the CEO of Intel, met Bill Gates. It was Tom Stenberg, who was the founder of Staples. But also having one foot in the regulatory pond, NASDAQ's a regulated stock exchange now. At the time, it was actually overseen by FINRA. They were our SRO, self-regulatory organization. So I got to be very good friends with people that ran the NASD, which became FINRA, the Financial Regulatory Authority, and it educated me more about how regulators, operate and work. And so all this stuff together. I dealt with our economists at NASDAQ and when we went to decimalization, how it impacted trading of share price of stocks. So it was an amazing education. And so, I understood, and I was able to connect the dots and understand what kind of dysfunction it was creating in the pre-IPO markets. And so I just, kind of concluded that this is one of the biggest problems besetting the country, and it needs somebody to be a champion to try and solve for it. And I think that, that's why not me?
Mm-hmm. Why not you indeed? We're going to take a quick break and then we'll be back. The Matt Brown Show is presented by Carafin, an investment bank that offers and supports direct private investments in U.S. operating companies. Over the past 20 years, investors have placed over $1.2 billion of private debt and equity in more than 100 companies through Carafin and its affiliates. Carafin leverages technology to empower its community of investors to deploy their capital far more efficiently than ever before and connects their community of engaged investors with worthy companies. Invest portions of your portfolio in direct private investments today. Visit carafin.com/Matt Brown Show for more. And we're back. David, I'm curious to just really get into some of the lessons that you've learned, not only as your time when you were at the NASDAQ, but also you've scaled companies as well. You've really been looking at a number of companies doing things at scale. When you cast your mind back at the journey that you've been on over all these years, has there been a time where you've had to make a really difficult decision? I know there's been many, I'm sure, but does something come to mind for our audience around the world in terms of a really difficult decision that you've had to make in terms of scaling a company or not? And I'd love to find out from you, what did you learn as a consequence of making a really tough choice, either as a CEO scaling companies or at your time as vice chairman of the NASDAQ?
Well, I think that when you're deep in an area and you understand it better than anybody else, there's always that it's a very complicated business and a complicated product set. And so we're trying to do something which is a little bit like, Uber for investment banking, or, Angie's List for investment banking, want to be the Amazon.com of investment banking. But, it's a regulated business. So the venture guys generally don't like regulated businesses. So, and they don't understand them particularly well, and they sell into them. You get a lot of blank stares from people. It's a very complicated product set. We're not selling rides to people, right? Every industry group requires different kinds of industry expertise. An equity deal is different from a debt deal, is different from a buy side M&A transaction versus a sell side M&A transaction versus equity capital markets advisory taking IPO advisory. And so it's the reason, it answers the riddle why you don't have a 20-something starting a decentralized network investment bank in the cloud, is because it requires a lot of experience. So, getting people to instantaneously understand the value is always been a little bit of the challenge, and it just takes almost an unnatural amount of commitment and perseverance. But that's the same thing that happened with the Jobs Act, right? I mean, I got a call from the CEO of a bulge bracket firm when we got the Jobs Act done, and he said, "Congratulations, David, for going from whack job to conventional wisdom in the short space of 3 years." And so I said, I think that's a compliment. And he says, "Oh, yes, it is." I said, "I agreed with you. I read your written work." And I said, "Why didn't you say anything?" And he said, "Because I knew they were going to paint you out to be crazy." Right. And so I probed on that a little bit, and largely because, you have entrenched forces and people, that make their living by saying that the window's open, we can do an IPO. And here I am saying market structure is causing the IPO crisis, right? There's something wrong with our markets. And so you have a lot of people that sort of deride you, sell against you. And so you just have to be able to put that, off to the side and ignore it and have the courage of your convictions. And I think that that's probably the most important lesson. I don't struggle with tough decisions in the sense that, no decision frequently is a bad decision. And so you have to make a decision. And we all know that we're not perfect. We don't have perfect information. You have to be comfortable with ambiguity, particularly as an entrepreneur. You have to be willing to pivot. Nobody gets it right at the beginning because you're not dealing with perfect information. And so, but if you like problem solving and you're achievement oriented and you think you're doing something that matters, then I think it becomes very easy, Matt, to kind of stay the course. Look, I never thought in a million years, I'd help finance a company or, that and have the CFO tell me that what we did with the Jobs Act actually got them the money they needed to then ultimately set in one vaccine save upwards of 2 million lives. And
that's quite.
This stuff matters. It matters. It matters in a macro scale. It's I could have gone into the practice of medicine but I could have never have saved or contributed to the saving. Let's just say it's because it's a team sport, right? I don't want to take. It would be crazy to take full credit of it, but done things that catalyze people into doing things that ultimately have saved millions of lives.
Yeah, it's. I was having ice cream with my wife on a date night on Sunday, and there was this quote up on the wall of this ice cream cafe, and it was basically, can't remember the exact quote, so I'm going to bastardize it now, but basically the worst decision you can ever make is not making a decision at all. And rather make a decision, fail and learn from it than just be paralyzed by fear, as an example.
Yeah, I mean, it's I remember 9/11, when the plane, I was on the telephone with my executive assistant and my office, I was up at NASDAQ market site, and my office overlooked ground zero, the 50th floor of One Liberty Plaza. And I saw the plane coming into the into the South Tower on the TV monitors, and my secretary, I heard the boom, and she started screaming because there was a 3-second tape delay or something. So it was, it was a very surreal kind of moment. But we had people running around hysterical, and I get eerily calm in chaos, and you just sort of, because all you know what you know, and all you can do is make the best decision. You don't know that somebody's not going to blow off a truck bomb or fly into the NASDAQ market site in Times Square. You know that it may be a target just because it's iconic, right? And you've now seen two World Trade Centers both get hit by jets, and America's under attack. And the rumors are going around that the USA Today building has been hit, the Pentagon has been hit, and the National Enquirer has been hit, and all sorts of crazy stuff that didn't happen. But that was the environment that we were in. And so we just, made a decision at the time to tell people, look, let's just all admit that we don't know what's going on. We don't know the extent of it. I'm not going to keep you here. If you're non-essential personnel, if you feel compelled to go see your loved ones or get to them, please do. At the time I was living in Manhattan. Here's my address. If you get stuck in Manhattan, you can crash, on the floor of my apartment or something. And we let all non-essential people go. And then from there on, we just tried to figure out what could we do to make the situation better, get the markets reopened, ultimately. And for me, this is something that very few people know. I mean, my team, I was incredibly proud of. We sent them out trying to figure out how we could help the U.S. economy. We got them to call all the NASDAQ listed companies, and they put in place over 200 corporate share repurchase programs, so that when the market reopened, finally, there were all these orders at lower levels, which gave the market all sorts of confidence. And what people don't understand is the NASDAQ stock market that day traded better than the New York Stock Exchange, which is fascinating because while the market was down, normally NASDAQ stocks have a beta of 2, meaning they should have gone down twice as much as the New York, and we did better. So it worked, right? It gave people confidence. And the reason for that, and the reason why that was important is because, we needed to get America back to work. We needed to get our economy working. So, another thing, I joke a little bit, but it's completely true. I was sitting in what we called the fishbowl at NASDAQ market site with Mike Oxley of Sarbanes-Oxley fame, right? And Mike was at the time the head of the House Financial Services Committee. And Mike asked me, what do you think about the airline bailout bill? And I said, I don't think I'm qualified to tell you. And he said, oh God, don't give me that. I said, there's nobody that's more qualified. You spent your whole life on Wall Street. I said, well then, Mike, and if you put it that way, you're Chairman Oxley, as I said, Chairman, I don't think you have a choice. And he said, what do you mean? And I said, look, I think you have to do it because what's going to happen is people are going to be scared to death to get on planes again. You're going to have bankruptcies. And just at the time when we're trying to get America back in business, you're going to have all sorts of higher air tickets, airplane fares, and it's going to really inhibit the economy from sort of getting back to where it needs to get back to some sense of normalcy. And he said, "Okay, then we'll do it." It was just like that. It was the best of America, which is, normally you see everybody fighting, and right there, he doesn't. He's one guy who chairs a committee, but in this particular time, if you have some things that make sense, there's no bickering. People are making decisions, and they went back and they passed the airline bailout bill.
Sure. David, I'm curious to double click on why you cope so well under pressure. I recognize the fact that you are aware that, and many of us are, that sometimes you just have to choose, even if you don't have all the information, or maybe you have information that's wrong. And I'm curious to understand, have you ever wondered why that is? Because I think a lot of us could benefit from understanding, why is it that you have these coping mechanisms when things are happening at scale, and the impact of making a decision, like whether it's 9/11 or whether it's in the context of valuing an IPO or passing the Jobs Act, How have you managed to cope with uncertainty when what the decisions that you're making are really going to change entire industries or the futures of a lot of people?
Well, I think that first I do very well in complex, systems, molecular genetics and genetics, genome organization is complex systems. Stock markets and the economy are complex systems, and so, it's comfortable for me to kind of make order out of chaos, if you will, and so it helps to kind of think that way. Look, everybody's got their own sorts of intelligence. There's all sorts of different kinds of aptitudes and IQs and emotional intelligence, and that just happens to be something that I'm blessed with. But I would tell you that part of it is just the process of acknowledging to yourself what you don't know and not to fret about it, and to understand in the circumstances that you just need to make the best decision you can in those circumstances, and to to push the things that are sort of extraneous and not important out of the equation and just focus on the nut of what absolutely matters and can contribute. And so 9/11, I think, just like a lot of Americans, I don't think there was anything that special except for the fact that I was in a place that had a bigger impact than other places. I did, like millions of other Americans, I did the best that I could do. Mom's taking care of her kids and trying to keep her kids from having even psychological problems and being damaged, because what does all this mean? And so we all did our bit, and I didn't try, and I couldn't possibly fix all the problems, but I could contribute with my team some solutions to a piece of the problem. And so you have to satisfy yourself with what you can do in the moment. And I think it's probably one of the proudest days of my life. I mean, working with all those corporate share repurchase programs. In some respects, I felt it was divine intervention, because normally I remember the crash of '87, and I remembered that people were flipped out until corporate share repurchases organically came into the market. So I just happened to be in that position at that particular point in time with that experience, and I was able to pull it out and leverage it. And the NASDAQ listed, the biggest of the big, were so insanely responsive. I mean, I remember talking to Larry Carter, who was the CFO of Cisco at the time. And I literally had a 30-second conversation with Larry. And he said, I get it. We've had a conversation about corporate share repurchase programs with the board. In this context, I think I'll be able to get this together. And sure enough, they turned around and they put a big corporate share repurchase order onto into the market the day the markets were reopening. We got that from Microsoft and Staples and Starbucks, all sorts of companies. It's probably one of the greatest stories never told. They were just magnificent how responsive they were.
Sounds to me like that should be a Netflix documentary. Yeah,
well, maybe at some point it will. There's all sorts of little anecdotes. We've had a kind of a blessed life in terms of the people that we've worked with and things that we've gotten to do. And look, I used to open up the NASDAQ stock market every morning, and I was holding Liza Minnelli's hand one time at the market open. I mean, sort of interesting things you get to do just because you're blessed. So,
yeah. I want to change gears and talk to you about leadership for a moment, because clearly you've learned a thing or two about leading or leadership in times of crisis, but also in good times too. You've also spent time with people a lot of us haven't. Steve Jobs, Bill Gates, Chairman Oxley, and a lot of other CEOs also in leadership positions, but doing things at scale also. Curious to get your view, David. What would you say, given all your experience, is the most important quality of a leader to have when it comes to doing things at scale?
I think communication's critical. You have to communicate a vision. You have to get people to buy into the vision. They have to be emotionally connected and engaged to the vision. I mean, it's going to be part of the challenge. I think we run in a decentralized, business that depends on human capital. You're not in the office, to do that sort of, a lot of that bond building kind of experience that folks will have. But I think that it's, that if you have the right vision and you can communicate it effectively and get people to buy into it, you get a lot of leverage from those people. If you can't, they can work at cross purposes and not deliver. And it was the same thing in Congress. I mean, people, how did we get the Jobs Act done? I was a molecular geneticist who took no political science, no poli-sci, didn't know how to do it, thought it was important. And on my own nickel, I went out and I spoke 30 times a year. Anybody that would put me on a podium, I had something interesting to say. And I got in front of people that, people would invite me because they heard it. And then I found myself in front of Chairman Shapiro, as the SEC chair, was called up to the Hill. She couldn't speak at the American Bar Association Securities Regulation luncheon. She was in Washington. She was supposed to be the keynote. They asked me to stand in. It was the invitation came from John White, who's a partner at Cravath, who was the former head of the Division of Corporation Finance. I made that presentation, and then they liked what they heard. It was interesting. It got into the SEC. I got invited out to the most important securities regulation luncheon. I got to speak in front of Congress, the House Financial Services Committee subcommittee on capital markets and government-sponsored enterprises a large number of times. And, it's if you show up and you keep showing up and you have an important message, eventually I think you can cut through the chatter.
Yeah, perseverance, man. Just do that. Like if someone just told me a story or just said to me, Matt, like this journey that you're going on as a first-time founder is normal. It's the insanity is normal. And all you need to do is burn your ships, because that story about the general, right? So he invades the foreign land and then he tells his lieutenants to burn all the ships of his army so they can't retreat. They have to go forward. And a story like that, which I only heard like much, much later, someone had just tapped me on the shoulder and said, Matt, I love you, but you got to persevere through all this, then that's the only way that you get to have anything of real value at the end of the road.
Well, and look, these massive disruptions that go on in economies and markets, they happen, and they happen not infrequently. If you think of the crash of '87, and then the dot-com bubble and what I call the bubble rubble in the aftermath of 2001 and 2, you look at the financial crisis of 2008. You go forward and I think I missed 9/11 in there. We had COVID, right? And these things are actually predictable. I gave a speech at Lafayette College. I mean, it was the President's Series, Entrepreneurship Series, and I actually talked about the importance of getting capital into the hands of entrepreneurs to solve great challenges of the next generation. And the first one on the list in 2015 was pandemics that we had in 2015, and so. That with the world at 8 billion or whatever it is in terms of population and everybody traveling and people encroaching on animals and everything and the world's temperature going up, that you have the conditions to see a higher frequency of disease mutation, things being transmitted and so on and so forth. So you have to have an expectation that there's going to be more of this. So in turn, we need technologies to combat that, which is one of the reasons why I think things like messenger RNA, vaccines and things are so important, because they shrunk the amount of time to get vaccines into market. And so for me, we have to stay ahead of these challenges And the only way that we're going to do that is get more and more money into the hands of more entrepreneurs, engineers, and scientists so they can do their thing and solve and come up with creative solutions to important problems.
David, I'm going to have a quick bit of fun with you. I'm going to give you the keys to the Matt Brown Show time machine. And I'd love for you to go back to yourself on day one when you started to get into, the investment industry and things like that. If you could go back to yourself on day one, David, and give yourself one piece of advice, if you think about all the things you've learned over the decades of experience that you've put under your belt to date, what advice would you give yourself about doing things at scale, scaling companies, scaling investments, scaling your impact and influence on the world?
Well, I'm not sure I would change anything. I on the one hand, if I wanted to make more money, I wouldn't have moved around and been the soldier for the CEO of Prudential Securities. I got moved around into a lot of different positions. And, in an investment bank, when you get a business really working and making a lot of money, you're going to get a bigger bonus. And so now they give you another train wreck or a new business to start. But the things that they had me do taught me a lot. And I think that all of those lessons have come important. They inform me, have come in handy. They inform me, taught me a lot about market structure, and I would never have been able to write the papers that I wrote that helped Congress understand what the challenges were in the IPO market and the listings market. And I never would have probably started this business. So, I think you can always regret doing things, but every one of the things that I've done along the way has taught me something. And so I wouldn't change any of it, and frankly, the things that I failed at miserably, I learned the most about. When something blows up in your face, it's easy to be successful, but you learn so much more when you have to clean up, your own mistake. And you understand the repercussions and you kind of learn to some degree how to, at least not repeat that mistake again. And I remember one time I was telling a young woman who was running London Equity Syndicate for me, and she had just found herself naked short on an IPO allocation, a bunch of stock, and she lost $100,000 or something. And she came to me with the short, problem and was expecting me to fire her. And I said, Jane, everybody makes mistakes. You'll never make that one again. And so I would never fire you because I've just invested $100,000 in your education. If it's an honest mistake that you make, the challenge is we all make mistakes. It's being able to fix them. And frankly, I was really impressed by the fact that she didn't try and cover it or do anything. She just brought it to me, and that that's somebody that's worthy of trust.
Yeah, it's easy to get on the wrong side of those options tradings. I've been learning about securities lately, as I mentioned to you before. I'm really doing more of my exams and things, and I tell you what, options is when you're coming in cold, you can get on the wrong side of that if you don't know what you're doing.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And so look, there's no perfect people, and my biggest fear sometimes is that I feel like I've got all the tools that I need now to really make an even bigger contribution, and I hope that I got enough runway in this life to be able to make that contribution, because I think that the economic infrastructure that we leave behind will be the toolkits that allow the next generation to compete against formidable and larger adversaries. I think it's essential to democracy that we get these things done properly, and that we overachieve, because our competitors and our adversaries are certainly hell bent at outlasting us.
Mm-hmm. David, thank you so much for being on the Map Round Show. It's been a real privilege getting to learn more about you and the incredible impact you've had on many, many people. So thank you for your time. It's been a real privilege having you here.
Yeah, nice to see you, Matt.
Cheers, David.